Hey guys, Krypton here, and today we're going to be talking about how feral tanks are the de facto off tank in Phase 1. But before we get started, please take the time to like and subscribe, and yeah, it'll really help me out. Okay guys, so I have not been doing a lot of feral tank videos. I apologize. I've been doing a lot of feral DPS stuff because I've been doing a lot of feral DPS stuff. But something that came to light that's actually directly affected me, but also I think might affect a lot of people going forward, is this discussion that's been going on in the background kind of for a while. So to give some context on what's going on, or at least what this all stems from, there was a discussion a long time ago in one of the classic casts. I think I'm not sure. There's so many podcasts. It's with Crix um, uh, and Sarth, and then they usually bring on people. Well, in that one, they had Zyrene and Rugs on, and they were discussing what's the best two tank combo. And Zyrene, kind of off the cuff, said, "Oh, without a doubt, Warrior Bear." And Ruggs was very adamant, no, it's going to be Paladin DK, which I think is crazy that two different people that play the game at such a high level could have such a different opinion on something arguably so simple. Who are your tanks, you know? So they had a discussion about it. I do see the merits of both arguments. I actually kind of thought that Paladins made sense as the main tank, and then I liked the idea of Bear tanks as the second tank. But I mean, my opinion, what is it? They actually had another update recently, I think it was a couple days ago or maybe even yesterday, where they discussed this again, having Phase 1 now out. And I have now some experience with this scenario they're talking about. And they then went back to it. Zyrene stuck to his gun, said, I still think it's Warrior and Bear, but Ruggs now says Paladin Bear. Now, whether the best main tank is a Warrior or a Paladin is probably still up for debate. Honestly, there just aren't a lot of Warrior main tanks right now, but apparently they're very solid. I literally have not tanked a 10-man or 25-man since, I think, beta with a Warrior, so I can't speak on the experience of a Warrior. However, as a cat, I have some experience for bear tanking. Which sounds weird because cats don't bear tank usually. So just to kind of explain what's going on and why bears are the number 2 in both of these people, regardless of who they decide the main tank, I kind of have to explain Naxx if you aren't familiar enough with Naxx, specifically Naxx 25, though this applies as well to Naxx 10. So in Naxx 25, it's actually a very easy instance, and you really only need one tank, and the main focus of that tank is actually handling trash really well, which is why the discussion between paladins and warriors who can handle trash really well is up for debate. They both do a good job, blah blah blah. Now when it comes to off tank, I know a lot of people said DKs, and don't get me wrong, I am not saying DKs aren't good, but the problem is if you're playing at even probably a medium to high level, you don't need a second tank for 95% of the content. The only time you ever get a tank is for Patchwork, because you absolutely need one, and for Thaddeus. Sorry, blanked on his name. Thaddeus, because you need the 2 tanks to go in. Now, we've been doing a DK off tank for a while, and everything was fine. But I had suggested a couple weeks ago that, hey, why don't I just tank the odd, mob for Thaddeus? Now, the reason this is really cool is because as a feral DPS in DPS gear, in DPS spec, I can tank by just switching to bear form and tank that mob with no problem. The healers didn't struggle to keep me up. I think I sat at around 34k health, maybe. I don't think I was even that high. I'm just giving an idea of where I was at. I'm sure I have video. It's probably already playing. Hopefully I edited this properly so you can see. But the point is that is something that DKs and warriors and even paladins can't do. They, at least not as easily. Because when you go into combat with those mobs, you stay in combat, and they can't swap their tank gear for DPS gear. Whereas I can just wear DPS gear and still successfully tank it. So for that one reason, you're like, okay, great, ferals make sense for that one scenario. Now here's the other scenario I'm not yet doing, or Archeola's not yet doing, but has been done and is becoming more commonplace, and that's Patchwork. So I have to explain the mechanics of Patchwork. I apologize, I do not have good footage. I die all the time on Patchwork, but essentially the way it works is Patchwork has a main target, his main threat. It's usually your main tank. Bam. And then for 25 man, there are 2 other people he'll target with hateful strikes. Of the 2 people, it's the next 2 highest on threat. So number 2 on threat and number 3 on threat, they're candidates. So a lot of people will run 3 tanks for this one fight. Usually you'll have your off tank and then one other tank who's either like your feral or another DK or something like that. And that works fine. But the problem is people don't want to give lose DPS by putting 3 tanks in tanking positions. So what they've started to do is they've taken these really fat boy, thick boy bears and made them their second threat. And what this does is allows you to not have a third tank. And now the way this works, I need to explain very clearly. You have your first tank, he's still taking the regular hits. The second tank is going to take your hatefuls, but because it's a bear and their health pool is so big that what they'll do is they'll chunk, and even after they've been chunked, their health pool is still larger than anyone else's. So if the healers aren't able to top them off immediately, it doesn't matter, they'll just get chunked again because they are that big of a health pool lead over everyone else. So this puts your melee in kind of a scary position because they are potentially a possible target for hateful strikes. So you do have to be careful here, but what it allows you to do is actually a lot of things. It allows you to cut down on tanks, allowing you DPS, and it allows you to cut down on healers, which I know sounds backwards, but you usually run 4 healers. You can go down to 3. Some people are even doing 2 healers on this fight because, especially if you have double holy paladins, they can just beacon and just heal both consistently and keep them topped off. A third one might be nice for the hatefuls to kind of cushion in the middle. But honestly, from what I'm seeing in the logs, you're seeing more and more people or more raids doing it with 2 healers and 2 tanks, or at the very worst, we'll say 3 healers and 2 tanks. And you could only do that with a feral. So in phase 1, if you're really trying to come up with like what's the best comp for a tank set, it's probably either a warrior or paladin. I'll let that be discussed in the comments below and other videos going forward. And a feral tank. I think that's really interesting. Now, keep in mind, a feral tank, off tank, is really a feral cat who does 2 fights as a tank. So it's not the same thing as like a full-time feral tank like you saw in TBC. I also want to make this huge caveat. This is phase 1 only. When we get into phase 2 and Alduar, that might change. There are fights where feral tanks are the go-to. However, in most scenarios, you're going to see people go back to the Paladin DK combo, which is more common. I'm not saying it's the best, I'm just saying it's kind of like the meta. So I just want to put that out there. If you are, a feral tank wondering, hey, do I have a position in phase 1? You might be able to argue your way into tanking a few fights. Or if you're a feral DPS that doesn't want to tank, might have to suck it up and take these 2 fights for the good of the rest of the raid. Anyway, guys, I just want to get this video out there. I will link the video discussion the other guys had so you can watch that in full. It's a little bit long, and hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, take care.